What's up, Mortal Kombat fans?
Yeah. What is up, our Mortal Kombat fans? Do we have fans?
I think we got 3 or 4, maybe 4.
No, we actually, I don't know if for our podcast, I don't really know if you can have fans.
Yeah, we have listeners.
They're like friends.
Yeah, friends.
Close companions on this journey of what we like to call religious trauma.
Religious trauma.
That's what we talk about here. Zachary, why do we talk about religious trauma on this podcast?
We talk about religious trauma because we come from a hyper-evangelical family and we were raised in the church with a father as a pastor.
Yeah, the Christian evangelical church.
Indeed.
Radical people.
Yes.
And
not radical as in like cool radical.
No.
Radical.
Yeah. Rad parents.
Radical, dude.
What's funny is that I do think our parents are pretty rad.
Yeah.
That's what makes this so painful sometimes. Is having radical Christian parents.
Radical.
Anyways, this isn't about them. This is about the trauma that can come from being raised from birth or just being like brought into a church and you get radicalized. There's so many different religions out there that radicalize people. Zachary and I have been out of this Christian evangelical faith for many, many years. Me a lot longer than him, but you like, I don't know, the last 7-8 years, something like that.
I mean, openly, yeah.
Yeah.
I think we all mentally choose it at some point.
True. We've talked a lot about our own personal trauma in this cast. So if you want to go back, you could watch like 60 episodes going deep and diving deep into that.
But that's why we are not here. Wait, said that backwards. That's not why we're here today.
No, we're not here for it. We're here for one of the greatest things that our podcast has finally evolved to. And that's that we have started to build a community of individuals and people that have been so willing and vulnerably coming on our podcast to share their stories.
Yes.
Some of those people have been directly connected to our own childhoods and the churches we were raised in. That being Calvary fucking Chapel.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes, indeed.
And so we have a special guest with us today. We've been so excited.
So excited.
And they reached out to us on their own and said just wonderful things about what we're doing. And now they're here with us, squeezing in for this week.
Last minute. The most last minute interview we've ever
never had a guest be this willing to jump in and do this. And so let's get into it.
Yep.
We'd like to give a very, very warm welcome to Sorcha Porter-Homes.
Yay!
Hi.
Hi,
What's up?
Sorcha.
Excited to be here. What up? I'm really excited to be here.
You.
Yeah.
It has been a
We're
long ass time. It's been a long time.
Yeah.
Like
You're both
14
taller.
years.
Even in these chairs.
From the computer, you can tell. It's like, you've grew.
I can tell.
Yeah, I know. I felt like a baby back then, and I still feel like a baby sometimes, but
Nice.
I've grown up a lot since our childhoods. But like you say that we look taller now. That's our fucking dog in the background just going nuts the moment we start recording.
Absolutely ape.
All right. I have 3 corgis. I understand.
Yeah.
Ooh, 3 corgis? How
I
cute.
have 3 corgis. If I'm being honest, it's too many corgis, but here we are.
It sounds therapeutic, to be honest. It sounds like a love fest.
It definitely is.
One of our main requirements for being on our podcast is that you pick up all 3 of your corgis into the shot.
We can do that. We can do that at the end. They're honestly like, I can hear all of them right outside the door right now. They would all be like
Aw.
putting their list. They're upset
Well,
they're not
that's-
in here with me.
It feels safe because our dog, my dog Atmore, is a very big distraction sometimes to our podcast. So at least we're in good company.
There's a couple podcasts where we'll have him in here with us and he'll just be walking underneath the table. And it's so nerve-wracking because we have so many cameras balancing everywhere.
Yeah, we don't let them inside. We don't let them in the studio. While
No,
we're
not
recording
anymore.
All right. So one of the first things that you said was that we look taller now, which means what is your memory? Like how far, like when was the last time that you saw me and Zach, I guess?
So the last memory I have of seeing you in person outside of your sister and brother-in-law's wedding where I was a server.
Ooh.
Oh my God. I haven't thought about that till right now.
Yeah.
Wow.
So I was a server at your sister's wedding. And then I think before that, the last time I saw you guys was at the mission trip that Calvary, Petaluma, and your church did together in San Francisco in the Tenderloin district.
The cute Tenderloin. We talk about that one.
We've talked about that trip a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I read that's the last in-person memory I have of you guys. And I remember because the day we had to go into Union Square and hang out, me, another couple of people from youth group, and Zach and someone else, I think, we'll not name them, but someone else from your youth group all went into like the high-end department stores and tried all the designer clothes. That's the last
I remember
memory that I have.
I remember that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How fun.
It was really
Where
fun.
was I?
It was really fun. We had a great time.
Was I there
We were
too?
You were, where were you?
You were too
You were
cool.
with one of your other friends. You were too cool.
So that was that. We talked about that one, trip or whatever. I was checked out, right?
Yeah.
I was forced to go. I'm pretty sure I was forced to go.
you
on
were,
that
so
trip.
you were 17 at this time.
Was I
so
really?
this was years after you've already been like middle finger to the church.
Yeah, but I was
done.
still at the parents' house. But I
Yeah.
remember that I didn't want to go there, and I was like, had to go there.
You and
I was too cool.
your good buddy at the time. Yeah. You guys were checked out.
We were checked out. Yeah, we were like smoking weed. And we were bad. Great memory. Thanks for triggering us from the start. This is going
No
well.
problem.
I'm just kidding.
That's what I'm here for. But yeah, that is my last memory of seeing you guys in person.
Yeah, so then we were our parents' church, which is no longer named this, but it was Calvary Chapel Healdsburg. So then you were like from Calvary Chapel Petaluma, which is where our dad was like a worship leader, a high school pastor, and then started his own church from Calvary Petaluma. All from the same county, but you don't live here anymore, right? Where are you now?
No, I'm in Portland, Oregon. I'm in the weirdest place in America, and I love it.
Oh, I love Portland. I've only been a couple times, but
Yeah, we moved
so
here
there's
about
like-
10 years ago.
is there a lot of protesting going on at the colleges in Portland?
There definitely is. There's an encampment at most of the universities. And it's interesting. Portland's like a very like activist centered town, which is one of the things I love about it is like people get involved and they give a shit. But like that's like downtown. And Portland, I live on the east side, on the other side of the river, which is just kind of like, it's a lot chiller here.
Yeah.
It's mostly like stoners and people who garden on my side of town. Like that's what this side is. It's great.
Our type of
You'd
people.
love it.
That sounds wonderful. Yeah, that's like the weird thing about cities, right? Is there can be shit happening and you can be like one block over and be like, I wouldn't even.
Yeah.
During the George Floyd protests, like my husband's grandparents called us really nervous because the George Floyd protests were intense here. And they were like, "Are you okay?" And I'm like, "We're like 40 minutes from there. Like, we're good."
Yeah.
Like, they would have to cross a river and go down some freeways. It would be a while.
Yeah.
So,
And that's like the problem with media, right? Is they make these things, they make these protests that are amazing and for good reason. They come out as being violent and horrible, and so people that live in other places feel so like scared. And you're like, first off, this is a good thing. It's the police causing violence, okay?
yeah, for sure. But
Well,
yeah.
Yeah. So hello there from Portland, Oregon. That's amazing. Let's jump into it. I guess like you're here, you come from the same Calvary Chapel, vicious religious trauma background. And I know you have a story to share. That's probably why you're here. But like you got out of the county. When did you like we know a lot of people have left this county that we know really well as in a way to escape, some of where this trauma has been embedded. And so when did you actually move out of the county?
So my husband and I moved to Portland in March of 2014. So it's been a decade now. Okay. We got married in December 22nd of 2013, and we moved March of 2014. Wow. At that time, it was largely just like cost of living in beautiful Sonoma County was not feasible for 22-year-old baby Sorcha and Matt. And then we moved to Portland and our rent was like a third of the cost and our pay was 50% higher. And we're like, why did we not do this sooner?
Wow.
Yeah. So that was when we left. And that's like, it was a big factor, I think, in like my deconstruction because I moved from where we grew up, like with all of the familiar people and surroundings and organizations, right? And then I moved to this city where like, I think we have like the largest queer populace per capita in the US. And so there's just like, I got exposure to all these different types of people when previously it was like very white, very Christian. And I started meeting like Muslims and like Taoists and Buddhists and people with this really diverse range of experience. And they were all good humans. And I started to be like, maybe there's something to this. Like, maybe. And I was like, I just couldn't picture a world where these people who are doing all this good and being so kind and wonderful to me and my husband, just like new in town, would ever go to hell. And that's sort of like what sparked things. Because we were still like going to church pretty regularly when we left. We like tried to find a church when we moved here for like a year. Until I started having crippling panic attacks every time I walked in the door of a church. I was like, why is this happening? But that's like, Portland really opened our eyes in like a really big way to the idea that like there wasn't just one way to be a good human, and that eye-opening experience sort of like was the first big domino to fall. Like there were other things looking back I can identify as like little chips away at the like the shell of brainwashing that, you know, is around you until you start to like look around and like look outside your experience. But the first big domino to fall was definitely moving here and like making friends. And I was like, oh, like there's more than one way to be a good human. There's more than one religion that can be fulfilling. And then I was like, do I even believe in my religion? Is it just because I was there all of the time? You know, and so on. But yeah. So that's
wow.
That's
that separation. I feel like separating yourself from the area is such a big part of deconstructing. I'm always really surprised on people who have like stayed in the area and fully deconstruct. But most people that deconstruct get out at some point and then come back and be like, this place is different than the other place.
Yeah, and like the power of diversity.
Yeah.
Right. It's like just being just like like immersing yourself in a diverse area, like you said, that's not white and Christian, is like you're forced to make friends that might not be that. And then you're like, wow, these are friendly people.
Yeah.
What do you know?
Yeah.
It was really striking to make friends who just liked me for me and not me for the religion that I was tied to. I think that was the big one. Is it made me recognize like, all my previous friendships were like people who became friends through church. And that was like our only real tie to one another.
Yeah, that's dropping a bomb right there. That's huge. Seriously. Just the correlations you would make in church just because Jesus is in between you two, that now we're best friends. Whereas you meet other people and it's like, I actually like you for you and not just because you're a Christian, and same vice versa.
Yeah, it was just like, it's very earth shattering, right? Like you go from like this lived experience that has been the same for much of your life. And then we moved here and like, we loved it. And it just like continued to get better, but it also just continued to like the very poorly laid brick wall that was built around me, like slowly started crumbling. And it was so it was also like kind of scary because I was married and a lot of our, you know how you get married in the church because that's what you do. And so I was like, is my husband going to be cool with this? And we started talking about it and he was simultaneously deconstructing at the same time as me. And we were both like just not talking to each other about it for a little while.
Wow.
And I remember like I can like vividly remember the moment that like we both mutually decided we didn't like, or told each other that we didn't believe in any of this anymore. We pulled up to a stoplight at the corner of Gleason and 82nd Avenue, which if you live in Portland, you know where that is. And we were planning, we were on our way to church and I was having like this rising panic attack, you know, because CPTSD. And, and I looked over and my husband looked at me, he's like, you okay? And I was like, I don't think I believe any of this anymore. And he was like, oh, thank God. I don't either. I've just been waiting for you to talk to me about it. And I was like
on the way to church.
On the way to church. Like this was the conversation. And we just looked at each other and I was like, you want to go to brunch instead? And he was like, yeah. And so that's what we did. And we never went again.
That sounds so sweet.
And then I imagine, right, because you just said the acronym CPTSD, which stands for Complex Post-Traumatic Stress Disorder, which on this podcast we say, join us.
Yeah.
You're in good company. But like you didn't know what that was right on that drive. No. Like did Yeah. So this was 10 years ago ish, 10 to 9 years ago then that you and your husband deconstructed together.
So we were here for about a year and a half. So it was about 8.5 years ago. Yeah.
Okay. I see.
So
yeah.
Before that conversation happened. Yeah. It's been a minute.
Yeah. That's long enough to like, because, these radical beliefs are like addictions, right? And you're like attached to them so much. So that attachment is so traumatic. So there's like enough time that you've had since you left the church to where you are. Would you say that you're like so far removed from it that, yeah, I guess what am I trying to ask? That like, so we've had guests on here where it's been like 4 years or 5 years. And like for me, I, started deconstructing, or I didn't really start deconstructing fully until like 5 years ago, but I've been out of the church since I was like 16-ish. And long enough now to where it feels like in my memory, like it's like, damn, this was my childhood. My childhood was, or like my teenager years. And we've had some guests where they didn't deconstruct till their 40s.
Yeah.
And that, it's like a big, when you have children and you like live all throughout your 30s, like kind of reinforcing and being the leaders that we were traumatized by, right? And then you come out of it, it's kind of a different experience. And so, yeah.
Yeah, no, it definitely is. I mean, we'll probably get into this more, but like I was very entrenched in the church. Like so my family, like we started church when I was like 6 at Petaluma Valley Baptist. And then we moved to Calvary Chapel when I got into junior high because they had better like teen programs, basically. And
especially Petaluma.
Petaluma had a great.
Petaluma had the big youth group, big church.
They were always known as the cool youth group.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so my parents were like, well, we're going to go where there's like better kids programs. That's what our kids need right now. And so they went there. And that was like the formative years of my childhood and the most trauma, for sure.
Yeah.
It got significantly more traumatic at that point.
They're like, we should do this for our kids. And it was dun, 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 dun.
Yeah. It was, I think that there's a lot of good intentioned people with really poor planning and no protections in place for kids is really what it came down to.
We'll clip that, and that's going to be the title of our podcast. I guess one of my main questions I like to start your story, right, is because you have this story, is why. I know you found our podcast. I know that we have a history. And so there's a lot that we can connect on the structure of Calvary Chapel, the way it was, the way the toxic masculinity seeped into all of our lives and how that was embedded in the religion itself and how Christianity is like its own thing and the Calvary Chapel is like its own part of that, right? Like in its own way. But why did you want to, like, why are you here? Why would you want to come do this on our podcast? Like, what, I know you found us and then you had this feeling of probably wanting to come on, and you originally, I remember the email you sent, and we can talk about that, but
we can talk about it.
Totally. But like, so what got you here? Like, why do you want to be here doing this?
So, actually, so it was Julia's episode that like brought me to the pod. I listened to cause her husband shared it, and we are social media friend acquaintances.
Wow. Really cool. And he's like a modern pastor.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so he shared it, and I was like, oh my gosh, so cool. Because I was one of the people that Julia sent the survey to when she did her study in high school.
Yeah.
And so I was really interested. I was like, oh my gosh, I remember when she sent this survey out, and I was like so excited to participate in it. So I thought it was so cool what she was looking into.
Yeah.
And and then I saw your podcast, and I remembered you guys and the last time we had talked. And mostly I initially reached out because I was like, I need to apologize to Nathan because I was an asshole to him. The last time that I saw him, you didn't remember, which is great. I was very relieved to hear that. But like, I was so entrenched in the church and so intense on like, and zealous for Christianity, that I like would spam people with like doom and gloom, fire and brimstone, like YouTube videos about how they were going to hell. And I sent one to you, And I remember that was like the last interaction that I had remembered with you. And then I saw your podcast and I was like, oh my God, I need to say sorry to this person so bad.
Oh, yeah.
And so that's why I originally reached out. But the reason I'm here is because I was repeatedly molested and sexually abused by boys in my youth group at Calvary Chapel, Petaluma. And I went to leaders multiple times over the course of a 4-year period asking for help, and no one helped me. And so my hope is that in talking about my experience and sharing that I can protect someone else's kid.
Yeah.
You know? That's why I'm here.
It takes so much strength just to even come on and say that. So thank you.
Yeah. And that's
Thanks.
a fucking amazing reason to be on our podcast.
Yeah.
And so I have a lot of gratitude. I am so thankful that you are wanted to do this. And our hope is that in this process of coming on a show like this, it's trusting the process that we have found for Zach and I, that talking publicly like this and then sharing it to our platform is such a healing thing in and of itself. It kind of is cathartic, right? It's something that normally these are the stories we talk about with our therapists, and that's, or maybe our loved ones who we trust. And so, but yeah, exactly what you said. That's why we have really vulnerably shared our own story, is to really hope that maybe somebody would watch this. This is medicine here. And so thank you for being part of our medicine circle. You are forever family, but you were family before. So we just wouldn't have known that until you reached out. And so there's a lot there. I just want to say that I think the reason why I don't remember you sending me that fire and brimstone video is because I was getting an insane amount of hate in my life at that time. And so one of the best ways that I dealt with that hate was suppressing every form of it down as deep as it could go. And then I dealt with it later in life. And it came bubbling up in angry, drunken ways for many years. And so I just commend you on reaching out at all to say that, because it made me feel so connected to you, because I have no hatred at all in my body for really anybody. Because I've learned I was the same way, all throughout junior high, bringing my Bible to school and telling people, like, if they don't give their life to Christ, they're going to burn in hell. And so that kind of comes with being a Calvary Chapel Christian zealot, is you were doing the Lord's work, and, makes a lot of sense. But now here you are.
Yeah.
And yeah, this is the real church. Okay, it's Church of Satan, which in many religions, Satan is good. Okay, so
as I sit here with my tarot deck to my right.
Exactly.
Yeah, no, I have another one coming in the mail soon.
Yeah, there's actually a lot of beautiful illustrations of what Satan actually has been over history, and it's not as evil as the church makes it seem. But
no, and I think that we could just get so lost in this, right? Like all of it matters. Everything in the universe is part of it, and we're a part of it, and everything is God. And so this conversation is God. Every plant is God. And so I feel the power of your story already. And so sexual trauma,
yes,
big, huge topic that we've talked about on our podcast. We both suffer from it in our own ways, but here you are. And just your experience being born in this world, as I'm sure in the church, you were forced to be told you are a woman. And so we know that experience. We've learned so much by other guests and just in our own healing and educational, growing up to learn these things, is that women had a very different experience than men in the church.
Yeah. Yeah, we did.
So
equally
the floor
as terrible,
is
though.
Yours. Totally.
Okay.
However you want to get into it, let's do it.
Yeah. So I was like, and yet what I need to preface this with is that, like, in the similar way to you suppressing all of your trauma, I had huge amounts of disassociation associated with my trauma, which is really common, especially for kids who experience sexual abuse. which is the thing I learned in therapy later. All these cool nude conditions that I learned about as I got older. But yeah, basically, we all grew up in purity culture, which I know you've talked about on the pod a lot. And from the female perspective of things, we were very much told that our sexuality was meant to be a gift to our future husband. And I remember literally, it was actually one of Julia's siblings giving this presentation. I remember literally them giving a presentation about how we were gifts to be unwrapped by our husband, and that every time we like kissed someone or held their hand or dressed immodestly, which I got in trouble for dressing immodestly all the time. They had like a sweatshirt on a hook in the youth group room that they would literally like hand me when I walked in the door.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
You don't remember this?
No, like
I don't remember her. It's her, like, you know, that. I mean, I remember that. Of course, I remember that. Like,
yeah. So
Sorcha, I have vivid memories. Sorry to interrupt you. I have vivid memories of every camp we would go to. They would make you wear a sweatshirt. Whereas like all the other girls, I don't want to say all the other girls, but they would choose a couple, and you would always be the one chosen to like put on a sweatshirt or cover something up.
Yep. Always. Forever. Always. My whole childhood. Part of that was because like I was just like an early bloomer and I had boobs. Yeah. And they didn't want you young men to stumble because you saw my boobs. Because women aren't supposed to have those until you're married.
No. Yeah, exactly. God. Yeah.
So I was always like being reprimanded for not dressing appropriately. I was constantly getting messaging that I was both too much and not enough all the time. And so it was super painful, and it really manifested later in life in like professional pursuits, because there was like a lot of like, when you hear that repetitive messaging all the time as a kid, that you are both too much and not enough, you like both want to suppress the things about yourself that make you like you and that make you stand out. And you also feel like you're never good enough. So it creates this really unhealthy feedback loop that I had to work through a lot and still work through in therapy. But it also makes you feel like you can't get help from authority because you're worried you'll be in trouble all the time. And so for me, when I was molested by other boys in the youth group, and I have a couple of incidents that are really vivid, some that are pretty fuzzy, but like, I think the biggest thing that stands out to me is like that messaging creates this very unsafe environment for kids. Is like being told as a girl that you are inherently bad because of something that's totally outside of your control. Like I have no control of how my body developed at that point.
Yeah.
Like I was a teenager. Like I was going through puberty. Like what the fuck? How am I supposed to, like, what am I supposed to do? This is just how pants fit me and shirts fit me. Like, and so, and like the rooms I was pulled out of and the learning opportunities I was taken away from because of my body was just like a huge amount of like shame messaging that I received repetitively throughout childhood. And so, and that was from the leaders of the youth group. That came from Zach Vesnies, that came from Josh Jarrett, that came from, and I'm going to name them all, by the way. That came from,
you should.
Paul Sheik, Steve Moline. I mean, there's a lot of, and they're all men. And when I would watch, I would remember literally watching them whisper in the ear of like a female youth leader and point to me. And then I knew I was getting like a sweatshirt or a baggy t-shirt to wear for the day. And so first off that, and like, let's not even think about how they were looking at me in that way to put a shirt on me. But on top of that, like when these boys who are at youth group who have not been taught about consent because they're only taught abstinence, have not been taught about what a healthy sexual interaction looks like. When I'm like this very insecure girl looking for security from someone, and this boy expresses interest in me, and we like go around the back of the church, and he goes to kiss me and then do things further than that, and I say no, and they don't stop. And And then I would come back and like try and tell a youth leader about it and be like, this felt wrong. Like this was bad. This happened to me. And they would just be like, well, if you would dress more modestly, that wouldn't have happened to you.
Oh, wow.
Damn, dude.
And now that I'm older and I'm like, I was actively telling adults in a designated reporter position that I was being sexually abused and I was being told it was my fault. And so I know I went to at least 4 people before I stopped just trying to tell people, and whatever like mental blocks to protect my psyche kicked in. But like I want to like really speak to the environments that most of our youth groups were, because I want parents out there or people questioning, or maybe if you're questioning and you have kids in youth group, to take a really hard look at how your kids' youth group is set up to protect your kids. Because if you think about it, think about the rooms we were in, and like, Nathan, you're a dad. So think about these rooms we were in as kids. They were large open halls with like, at least at Calvary Chapel, Petaluma, like 60 kids in them and maybe like 8 adults, with 4 to 5 entrances and exits in and out, with no security on those entrances and exits, and dark parking lots and bushes and trees and stuff surrounding the building with limited lighting and no fucking security. And most of these leaders were not background checked. Most of them were not trauma trained. Most of them were not like taught how to recognize the signs of abuse in children, but they were in charge of so many of us. And our parents just dropped us off and thought that we were safe. Yeah. And so when I got into a situation where I, sneak out a door because no one's paying attention with this boy who I think likes me and wants to like say nice things to me or give me, like, I don't know, I'm 12 or 13. I don't know what, because I've also only been taught abstinence. So I didn't really know what to expect. And then I get pinned against the wall with this 200-pound wrestler's arm across my neck, just not able to get away. And then I come back inside like obviously traumatized. Yeah. And no one believes you. Yeah. And it's like, this should never have happened in children where adults are in an environment where adults are in charge of children. Never. This shouldn't be allowed to happen. If that ever happened at a school, think about the outrage that would ensue. Think about the protocols for safety in grammar schools and junior highs and stuff. Like, you can't go onto a school campus if you're not like a parent or someone who has been reported as someone allowed to pick up a child. Like, why was it that we were so ill supervised and poorly taken care of that I was able to be sexually abused multiple times 40 feet from an adult who was supposed to be taking care of me?
Yeah.
It's super fucked
and even
up.
be the one asking for help to the right people and having them make you the problem.
Yeah. I was constantly, that was a repeated thing, was like, well, you're asking for it. Literally people saying that. Like, let's pray and repent. That was a big one too. Is I would be like, hey, this guy did this to me and I don't feel like I didn't want it. And now I'm worried that I'm going to be an unwrapped present for my husband. Oh. And they'd be like, well, you have to repent because your shirt was too low cut. So you tempted him. Literally, those were the conversations I was having at like 13.
Yeah, you're saying it. Yeah. Well, no, that's exactly what it is. It's exactly what it was.
Yeah. I'm so sorry that you had to go through that. I also just love you like saying the names of, because these people are still in leadership.
Yeah, they're still running the same churches.
God, so many of them have daughters. Teenage daughters.
New kids that are now taking the spots that we were in. But yeah, this is real sexual trauma, sexual abuse in the Calvary Chapel Church here in Sonoma County. That to this day has been swept under the rug, right? And still not acknowledged as being what it is, right? Which is like all the things you're talking about, the awareness of what sexual abuse in children are. How does abuse look? What does psychological trauma look like? What do you do when a 13-year-old girl comes to you and says, this just happened, right? Like, one of the points that you made about how none of these leaders or adults are, trained on these aspects of child psychology or child care. Most of them are like, like in our experience, it would be like, oh, this person got off heroin 2 years ago, gave their life to Christ, and now they're a youth
pastor,
like a youth facilitator at a camp, right? And and so it would be really, and we saw a lot of that because we were pastors' kids, and so we would see like weird shit behind the curtain, and until I was older, I'd be like, yo, dude, this is weird.
I didn't even clock it as weird until much later because you're so blinded with the idea that the church is all good and all knowing, and anyone involved in the church is all good and all knowing, and all their words are all good and all knowing. And so you'd see someone, just got out of prison for being not even a meth addict, an actual drug dealer, and all these crazy things. But that was my past before I got saved. I got saved in prison, and so now they're good people. And then you hear terrible, terrible things that they do to people in the future. And you're like, well, why did we think this wouldn't happen?
So then, and so then you're like 13, 14, these things have happened. And then you told us in the beginning of our podcast that you and your husband didn't like leave the church until you moved out of the county, which means that you lived with this trauma. Was this trauma brought up to your family? Was this something you brought up to your parents, or was it like hidden in that way?
So it was hidden from them, and I wish that it hadn't been, because I actually think they would have done something. Because when I was, after a couple of years of like going through that, and then also trying to get help from my leaders who felt more approachable than my parents, because when I would go to the leader and say, hey, this has happened, they would be like, well, you did something wrong. So then I was, of course, not going to go to my parents. If this leader was going to tell me I was doing something wrong, just think of how mad my mom and dad would be. And so I just like repressed it. And so the rest of my high school experience and then early into college, it was repressed. And then when I went to, and I guess this is also really common in sexual trauma incidents, when I went to college and went through like a big life change of like moving into a dorm and like experiencing living on my own, I started to have like horrible night terrors where I would remember a lot of what was happening, or like have a dream version of it. And then because my mental health was suffering so much, I told my parents, and they were of course devastated. No parent wants to hear that happened to their kid in a place they thought they were safe. And so my dad was like, who was it? And I was like, you're going to go to jail. I'm not going to tell you. But my dad was like fully ready to kill someone.
Good.
That's called love. Yeah.
Yeah. No, he was super properly pissed. And my mom had a really rough upbringing, and so she was like, okay, we're going to get you into therapy, and we're going to get you help that you need. So I got help, and I got therapy at that point, and that was really good. That was when
it a Christian therapist?
It was a Christian therapist, but they were licensed. Ooh. They were a licensed therapists. They had
we always like to make that point.
It was a Christian therapist, but they were properly licensed and agreed that this was not my fault. They were not of the same camp that the leaders were in. I'm just gonna like clear so I can see through my glasses.
We have Kleenex here in studio. If I could transfer them to you over, I would.
I think I have some in my office somewhere, but that's okay.
Tears are accepted here. It's called purging. It's a beautiful thing.
It's cathartic. It's good. I knew I would probably cry, but I just think it's too important to talk about this stuff to like let that stop from sharing. But yeah, so it wasn't until I was like 19 that I told my parents. So yeah, I went through all of that like pretty silently and alone through most of my junior high school experience. But like, I just repressed it. I was the president of the Jesus Club. I ended up getting a job with Jews for Jesus. I worked as an intern with them. So I'm Jewish on my father's side, and my dad and our family was really involved with Jews for Jesus. And I got involved with Jews for Jesus my junior year of high school, and I would like spend my summers doing missionary campaigns in like New York and San Francisco with them. And then I was on track to become a Jews for Jesus missionary. That was the plan. They helped me get into Moody Bible Institute and go to seminary in Chicago.
Wow.
And while in seminary in Chicago, my husband and I started dating. And there was just like, it was like, and I dated a lot of guys in the past. There was a lot of unhealthy relationships that followed all that sexual trauma.
Yeah. That's what I was going to ask you.
Yeah.
Like, but keep talking, but I do have a question about that too.
Yeah, so there's a lot of unhealthy relationships that followed that sexual trauma. But by now I'm like 20, 21, and I've met my husband. I've reconnected with my husband. We actually met at youth group many years prior. He was just a very quiet, like introverted boy. But
like, I'm gonna marry you someday.
Yeah. But yeah, anyways, so we started dating when I was at Moody Bible Institute. And that was looking back, one of those experiences that was like, oh, that was chipping away at the facade that was Jesus. Got expelled from Moody Bible Institute for wearing pants to chapel too many times. And yeah, it's always clothes for me. The clothes really
dude, your clothes, man, your clothes.
Just have... it was inappropriate, and Moody Bible Institute was more about I think rule following than it was clothes. And I've always I don't know if you find this a theme in your life, but I have a serious authority problem. And so if someone's like, you can't do this, then I'm like, well, why not? I don't see a good reason why I can't wear pants to chapel. This is ridiculous. And so I wore them in protest, and then they were like, you're not allowed to come back next year.
Wow. Damn.
I mean, it was all of the chapels that I did wear pants to, so it was a blatant disregard for the rules, but it did feel stupid. It was very good for me, though. I'm glad I didn't stay at Moody Bible Institute. But anyway, so then I got expelled from Moody Bible Institute, and I moved to like Israel, and I left Israel in the middle of my mission trip because, hindsight, I was having like a trauma response to proselytizing to Jews in Israel, screaming at me because I was like, this is not right. They don't want this message. Why are we sharing it? And I was just like, I want to be with my boyfriend. I want to go home. And so I went home, and they all thought that I was like a failure running home to a boy who now I'm married to for a decade. So I feel like I made the right call.
Yeah, who's laughing now, right?
Yeah, it was like, but it was just like, a lot of it was just like listening to my inner voice. And like, I didn't know what it meant at the time, but at the point where I started following my inner voice, the things that I actually wanted started to happen. What was the original question? Sorry.
I don't know. That was amazing. I think you just gave us like a kind of a snapshot of your teenage into young adult life, right? And then you and your husband were married, and then you guys moved, like 9 years ago, and here we are. And I know the last 9 years have probably been packed with, or 8.5 or whatever, been packed with a lot of healing, which I want to get to at some point. And like the fact that you just, that your dad's Israeli, you moved to Israel, right? Our parents have been to Israel many times. They take the church to Israel every other year, except right now, right? Because of, and so I think like Christianity and its connection to all the conflict going on now is significant, right? And we have seen that's been a huge conflict just with more Zach and the parents than me, because I'm like, we don't talk, okay? So that's just the way it goes. And so you have like a direct connection to like this really interesting, right? It's in our country. We see the connection to Israel and war and religion and like how these things intertwine. And but just to, go for it.
Oh, I was just saying the last time I was in Israel was during the last conflict in Gaza. So it's interesting that the last time I was there, it was not the level that it's at now. But I just remember sitting on the rooftop of my apartment building in Tel Aviv with my two friends who had just gotten out of the IDF. And we were super drunk, and we were counting missiles as they went over the apartment building. 24 one night.
Wow. Yeah, that's. I guess I just have to ask, like, how do you feel about that now? Like, where are you at with that now?
So I'm not a Zionist. There's a lot of people who conflate being Jewish with being Zionist. And so I think Netanyahu's a monster. I I think I probably have a deeper understanding of what has led it to here than what like largely the media has portrayed. But ultimately, I see it as genocide, and I think it's wrong. And I'm heartbroken for all of the families in Gaza. I'm heartbroken for my friends who are in Israel having to serve in a war they don't believe in. And I would really like to see reform in Israel. And I believe Israel is currently in apartheid because I lived there and that's what it was. So
say it as it is. I love it.
Yeah, well, you have healed. to come from your background, like genetically, your bloodline, to the Christian church, Calvary Chapel's impact on Israel, you going and being a Jew for Jesus, to hearing you say that is, goddamn, you've had a full circle, right? Of just what an experience.
I mean, I think a lot of this experience teaches you to just say fuck it and say the things that you know are true, because like the alternative is horrible suffering and mental anguish.
And to listen to that inner voice that you brought
inner
up.
voice.
The inner voice throughout all of your upbringing in the church, you're told to reject that inner voice because the self is so hated on, in that you listen to Jesus, pray to Jesus, but your inner voice is
deny
terrible.
Yourself.
So you start to deconstruct and you're like, this inner voice is telling me that you are bad.
Yeah.
So I'm going to believe it.
And there's also part of that healing, right? That's like for me, and I'm not going to put this on anybody else, but I see the correlation with a lot of healing in life, not just with religion, but that we hate our pasts. We hate our past selves because we see ourselves being like culprits in that same bullshit or that same genocidal way of thinking but like you have to go through that self-hatred to realize that like the only way you heal from that is to love even that person, right? And to like
that's a really hard thing to get to, like getting to that place. I've only recently, like probably in the last year or two, gotten to there.
Me too. Mine has been literally in like the last 2 years, so I'm right there with you.
You're talking about loving your younger self,
like learning how to truly love yourself, all of it.
Yeah,
all of yourself.
It's difficult.
To get off addiction, to get off alcohol, like abuse, to get to heal from sexual abuse of your past, the trauma, maybe the trauma you inflicted on other people, right? Part of that is you have to love all of yourself to get to a place of feeling safe enough to love others fully.
Yeah.
Right. And to be that light and to shine. And that is a goddamn process.
Yeah.
It really is.
It totally is. Absolutely.
You talked about dissociation, and I want to like just emphasize, you know, a lot of the reason why you're here, right, is that your story is hopefully an avenue for parents or even other kids to be like, oh my God, my experience matters. I need to like, or whatever, or maybe to keep from these experiences happening. But I too have suffered from disassociation, and I was never perceived as somebody that was quiet. I was always very loud, very obnoxious, and always in your face about what my way or the high, but deep down inside, there was a lot of experiences that I had from my childhood that led to other experiences in college, right? That were like traumatic sexual experiences to where I was incapable. And I was just talking to my wife this morning about this to try to prep for our podcast, because I was talking to her about some of my experiences and I was in some of my like high school and college experiences was like incapable of saying no to people in some ways that led to more trauma that I dealt with later in life. And you were talking about like these sexual abuse experiences that you had as a kid in the church, like 12, 13 years old and 14, looking for help in the church, right? The only people that you knew to go to, and they're not offering you any support and they're causing shame. This is your fault. It's your fault this happened to you. And so the way out of survival, it sounds like, right, what happens is you then, when something else happens in life, like, which tended to happen, like we almost found ourselves in more dangerous situations because that's kind of all we knew. So it was like, this is what love is. Like, this is how it goes. And then you like were I was incapable of saying no to certain people, and something would happen. And so in high school and college, did you experience that too, where you were like having experiences where you would disassociate later in life?
Not later in life that I actively remember, but the idea of not being able to say no and being able to set boundaries did follow me throughout college and my younger adult years. And I've like analyzed that a lot. And I think for me, it came down to part of that denial of self messaging that we receive is like, if I'm going to continue to deny myself, that part of that involves ignoring your intuition and your inner voice, right? So when you get into a situation that's dangerous, you are literally not equipped with the basic tools of humanhood because you've been suppressing them for so long to like be able to give yourself the ability to say no. And so while I definitely put myself in dangerous situations, I just ended up not being in dangerous situations with dangerous people. Like, there were definitely times where I would, like, you know, run off with some dude that I just met to go hook up. And I totally could have been killed in hindsight in the way that I did it, because I didn't tell anyone where I was going. I didn't, like, have someone tracking me on their phone or anything. Like, any of the things I would recommend to a friend now. Like, when my friends who are single are dating, we have like a protocol. Is like, they'll be like, okay, we'll share your location with me and text me the addresses of where you're going and what time you think you'll be leaving. Because that's just what you do with people you care about. And those were not things I was practicing or things that I was taught to practice. And so, like, while I didn't end up in really dangerous sexual situations in college, I mean, I ended up in shitty ones where it was not a fun time because I didn't know anything. I didn't end up receiving further trauma later from it. It was all isolated to my formative years, at least that I remember.
Yeah.
But it did manifest in the form of having really terrible boundaries in my professional life, because things that were, like, morally wrong with employers, I didn't know how to say no to because I was so much about servant work and denying yourself.
Yeah. No, yeah. Okay. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you're speaking my language. I really relate. I relate to this idea of boundaries. Boundaries, one of the ways that I resolved, like, when I kicked back against the church, one of the ways I felt, like, at 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, like, those, like, the first real 5 years that I was breaking free, it was like anything that the church told me was a sin, right? This idea of denying myself or whatever. Like, I was like, no, this is my body. I get to, like, it was all about experience. If I haven't experienced it yet, then how am I supposed to know for me it's bad or good? And there's a lot of bad shit you can do in life that's really not good for you.
Yeah.
And I would be like, I have to do that because they told me everything was bad. And how am I supposed to know? And I would put myself in, like, you know, not like, there was some dangerous things, but same idea, lack of boundaries. And then something would happen and I would be, like, filled with shame and guilt, the same shame and guilt that was, like, embedded in me in all of my childhood. But I was my own youth pastor. I was my own bad, you know, like, facilitator at a camp, you know, like, for many years. It was like, now look what you've done, Nathan. Repent for your, you know, what you've done to yourself. And then I would just beat myself up. You know, the culture gets embedded in you. It does. Until you officially start to deconstruct, right? Until you actually start the process of being honest with yourself and hopefully having a professional, like, work through it or whatever, have friends or somebody that can relate.
I think professional. Yeah.
When did you start getting this help? Like, when did you really start the deconstruction and start to learn these things?
So a lot of it came around. So I think we moved in 2014. That would have been around 2015, 16 is when I started to really deconstruct. And then, like, a lot more around 2018. I think 2018 is when I was really like, the shackles are off. Like, this was wrong. This was an entire, like, I am not a slave to this experience. And, like, this is something that happened to me, but I don't need to be a victim. And that's, like, when I really started to, like, go to therapy, talk about it with the therapist, work through it, explore what my understanding of my own faith and upbringing was. And at that point, like, what was really interesting is, like, when you, like, threw off the shackles of Christianity or whatever, how many other things opened up to me. So that year, like 2018, was probably, like, the big year. And my husband and I decided that, like, look, we get one life. There's Like nothing is guaranteed. We've been through all this shit. We've worked our asses off doing this thing that the church told us to do, you know, get a job, be a good servant, be a good neighbor, be a good spouse, you know, tithe, participate in these things. And none of it's really served us. So why don't we figure out what we want to do? So we sold our house and everything we owned and started traveling the world full time.
Fun.
And that was probably like, that was like full deconstruction mode. Is like, if I'm not going to limit myself to these things, what else can I do? Like what limiting beliefs have been put upon me that I can deconstruct? And so we just tried all of them at once. And I don't know that was the right way to do it. But it was really good. And so that was further down the rabbit hole of like diversity and experience, traveling the world, going to other countries, seeing how like Christian evangelicalism isn't like unique to America, but it is really, really prevalent here in a way that it isn't in other places.
Yeah.
And so it was really interesting to get that experience. Like, you know, how you've talked in the pod about like people that, you know, who grew up Christian and had like a nice childhood without significant religious trauma, which sounds impossible to me, but
yeah, totally.
But yeah, so I think that was probably 2018 is when it was like, all right, let's blow it all up and see what happens.
So what's your spirituality now? You've deconstructed. Do you have any spirituality? Like,
yeah, kind of. I guess I'm like an agnostic, ethnically Jewish, intuitive witch.
Nice, Wicca, love it,
man. That should be your LinkedIn right there.
That should be, yeah. I'd have to make a separate LinkedIn for that brand.
Yeah.
Hard to fit that in with what I do for work.
Yeah.
I want to get into more of the witch part, but did you say, I want to hear you right, you said that you and your husband like went through other religions and wanted to see if you believed in those too, or
he didn't. I did. Like I looked into like Buddhism. I looked into Judaism. I'm still looking into Judaism, I guess. Just like trying to learn
Judaism
about it.
is beautiful because I'm learning more about all religions in a different way from a feminism, divine femininity standpoint. I'm reading this book and I just finished a chapter on actual like familial ancient Jewish practices and like the connection to planet Earth and how God is a mother, like God is a woman. Like I was just like, there's so much. I was just like, oh my God, this is like, I had no idea. And so.
Yeah, Judaism's way better than Christianity. I don't know why Dad left it. I feel like it was a better deal. Like, I really wish I would have been raised. Like, I don't know if I would have appreciated it the way that I do now, but I wish I would have been raised more Jewish. Like, we were raised with Jewish culture. Like, we celebrated the holidays. I went to my grandparents' house for Shabbos, like, at least once a month. Like, I speak some Hebrew. I speak a decent amount of Hebrew. Like, I can read Hebrew. Like, and part of that was seminary, right? But yeah, no, I guess I've explored Judaism. I've explored Buddhism. I've explored like witchcraft, which really isn't a religion. It's more of like a practice. It's not viewed like you can be a religious witch and be like Wiccan, which is a religion, but you can also just like think crystals and sage are fun and be witches.
Yes, which they are, and they matter, and they work when you're traveling the cosmos. Let me tell you.
Yeah. And witchcraft is beautiful. Same with like voodoo and everything that we were raised to think is demonic and hateful, when it's actually a lot of it, actually, if not all of it, is focused on love for the most part and giving more love to the world and gaining more love. And
isn't it interesting really how they twisted it? Like how we were told that it was this terrible thing. And then when you like actually experience it, you're like, I don't see why we were so upset about this. This is kind of dope.
Yeah. I think the main, they do that because colonialism is a powerful fucking thing that's been around forever. Yeah. And colonialism is happening right now. And so that's why, once again, for our listeners, Judaism is not Zionism. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
But I was like, I wanted to make the point that when I first left the church, you know, and I was like kicked out and living on my own, one of the first classes I took at the junior college before I transferred to my university for nursing school was world religions.
Tough class.
And the reason why I wanted to take it was because I was on a search. Like when I left Christianity, I was like, I couldn't just leave religion. I was like, then what do I believe, right? I was so angry at God. I was angry at my parents. But I was like, okay, so then Islam is beautiful. Love Islam. Judaism is beautiful. I love Judaism. Like Buddhism, totally. And like Taoism took me over, and Hinduism. And I was like, I'm going to believe in all religions. And I just became like this super, like in my head until I realized, maybe you don't have to be searching for like, it seems to be like a common theme in people that are radicalized is when you come out of a radical group, you immediately attach to something else more radical because it feels so safe, right? Because it's like, it's so scary to not have something to like have a religion. And so I went on a similar path. I was just like,
I had a therapist describe it as like, because I was doing that, and I had a therapist like clock it. And she was like, just because we've removed this giant thorn from you doesn't mean we need to put another one back in. And I was like, oh,
you're
right. It's like, that's what it was. It's like, we walked around with this like big gaping wound of like stabbing us in the heart for our whole lives. And then we remove it and you feel like you need to put something back in there, but really you just need to heal.
Yeah.
Totally. And like,
you need to have surgery. You need to have open heart surgery. You need to have bypass and surgery. And don't just put a Band-Aid.
Yeah, it's hard not to turn everything you do into some sort of religion now. At least that's something I struggle with. Everything I find passionate, I have to be like religiously passionate about it, or it's not of value.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's like, I think that it's interesting that that's like a thing that you've both experienced too. Cause I don't know, like the hyper perfectionist, high performance mentality of like, that I think we get, the messaging you get of like using your talents for the greater good and for God's glory and like not wasting gifts and, do all things unto he who has made you, like to glorify him. Like that messaging gets carried over into other interests in life. And there are people, did you know there are people who just have interests that they're not obsessed with in an unhealthy way?
What? We're trying to find them, but we just have so much conversations with religious trauma individuals that we're all the same.
There's people on our podcast, like Forrest Benedict was one on our podcast who literally was like, during the podcast, there was like a mistake that happened. And we were like, okay, don't worry, we'll take that out. And he was like, or don't. And we were like, what? Leave the mistake? And like, we definitely have already overdone it to a certain point with our podcast, right? Because we want to film in 4K. We want to be the cleanest podcast people have ever seen. And so when things start to go a little wrong, it stresses us the fuck out sometimes which is always good practice for us to be like, wait a minute, what are we really doing here?
Yeah.
Like, what are we doing here on our podcast? Like, what the point is to have this, and that's it.
Yeah.
And however it happens is how what matters. But totally, there's benefits and curses to being a perfectionist for sure.
Yeah. Well, and I guess I imagine for you guys, because you are PKs, there's like your life was a like very long performance for other people in the church. Like you constantly must have had to perform. I mean, I was in worship team and like various places of leadership, and I felt that way. So I can't imagine how much harder it would have been to be the child of the person leading the church and living in the fishbowl.
There's definitely like I don't consider these things like tiered. I just think that Christians, I don't want to blame all Christians. I'm trying to do that way less, and I'm trying to accept and surrender to just people's choice to find their own beloved. But like radical Christianity, I feel like are victims. There's a lot of victimizing that happens as Christians. So anything when you're at a public school and you're like a radical Christian, you were leader of the Christian club at yours. I was president of my Christian club in junior high. And so we like chose to be leaders, performative in every area of our life, because every time we walked out into the world, this was the world that we weren't supposed to be in.
Yeah.
So it was like, wow, everyone around me is worse than me. So I better perform with my teachers, with my lead. Like I was always trying to be the best. And it was on a level of extreme for sure in my experience of the family. But I saw that. And the thing that I was jealous of is in our youth group, I would see kids come to youth group and their parents didn't give a fuck about like them and how they lived. And I'd be like, God, that must be so nice.
Yeah.
Like anyways, because they would look up to me as being the example. Right. And I'd be like, I want to be you because you don't even get to like, you don't have to try.
Yeah.
Like I have to pretend to pray right now. You know, like, so I was performing for the good Christians in the church too. And that's where it was a level of like, definitely intense.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. I don't know.
For sure.
Wow. So then
hold on, I have a question.
Wait, you have a question? I have a question.
No, I have a question.
Okay, fine, you go.
I'm going to take it over. Take the reins.
Go for it.
So you and your husband, you guys deconstruct. I think you said you were like 23, 22, somewhere around that time, 2014, 2015. Yeah, somewhere around there. What was the response from your friends and family from you leaving your faith?
I didn't tell my family for a while because we were 1,500 miles away. My parents moved to Colorado, which was very advantageous as a newly deconstructing ex-evangelical Christian, that I didn't have to deal with them on a regular basis. And so it wasn't until like the Christmas of the following year after that, like that corner stoplight conversation Matt and I had where I told my mom, and I was like, my mom was talking about spiritual warfare. And I think she was talking in the context of like something political that was happening. So this would have been right before I think the Trump elections would have been when this was happening. And I was like commenting on something terrible that had happened. And my mom was just like, it's spiritual warfare. And I looked at her and I was like, no, that's bullshit, Mom. And first off, she was shocked that I cursed. And second of all, she was like, what do you mean? I was like, I don't believe that. She's like, you don't believe in spiritual warfare? And I was like, Mom, I don't believe in God. And she just like mouth open and just kind of like quietly got up and left the room. And then I quietly got up and left their house. And that was the end of that conversation. And so that was when I told my parents. That was how I did it, is we were having an argument. And I was like, I don't believe in this anymore. And then we both left the room. And so they didn't really acknowledge it. They were definitely struggling. Like they tried to, invite me more to church when we would come out to visit. But again, I had the advantage of being physically very far away and having a very healthy community of friends and like chosen family back in Portland. So it was like, I think that would, like, if anybody who's listening to this is deconstructing, like, you need to go make friends. Like, it's very hard when you're not in the same building every week, once or twice a week, doing the same things, praying to the same God. It's very scary, but you need to go out and make friends, because if I didn't have the relationships and friendships that I have, I don't know how I would have done this. But yeah, so that's how they reacted. They weren't super stoked about it. They didn't really like it, but they also didn't like disown me, or anything. We just have like very fundamentally different views on what things are okay and what things are not okay. And I think you've talked about how you have like a no politics, religion policy with your family. And that's kind of
we try. Yeah, it's tough.
Yeah, that's my rule. That's
Nate's
for
rule.
me. Yeah, that's been that way for a few years now, and it's just been flawless. We're great.
But yeah, that's how it's been.
Zach has a different relationship, so he's got his own process of that.
Yeah, I get myself in trouble a lot. Yeah, I put myself in really, really bad circumstances.
I think because my parents, so like my family, since, we're here. My parents met in Alcoholics Anonymous. So that's how they came to faith, actually.
Interesting.
So their faith is very tied to their sobriety. They've both been sober. So I'm 32. They've both been sober 36 and 38 years, which I'm very proud of them for. And that's amazing. Sure. But Christianity is what they subbed in for that addiction. And arguably it's healthier than all the nose candy my dad was sniffing and all the drinks my mom was drinking. And I'm very glad I didn't grow up with active people active in their addiction as parents. They were sober when they had me.
Totally.
But like those people never went away. They just got sober. And so in some ways my parents are really like understanding because they're like, hey, like, you know, it could be a lot worse. You could be a drug addict. But they also deal with a lot of people who aren't Christians on a regular basis. My dad owns his own business. And like he doesn't have a Christian client requirement or anything. So like they interact with the world a lot more, I think, than like a pastor's family would. So they mostly just were like, okay, how do we have conversations with you now that we don't talk about like your mission trips with Jews for Jesus or what you're getting involved in at church. So it was like some awkwardness and finding common ground again. But overall, it was pretty good. They still try and they would get mad when I wouldn't want to come to church with them when we'd come to visit. We'd go to visit them in Colorado and they're like, okay, we're all going to church. Let's go. And I'd be like, no. I remember my mom multiple times getting really upset about that. She's like, well, you're a guest in my home. I was like, yes, I am. And if that's going to be a problem, I'll leave. And she just wasn't expecting that response. So but that's been, so for them, I think it's just like, they would rather have a relationship with me than, like they know that I'm not coming back to it. Like I've set those boundaries with them.
Yeah.
And so it's taken several years, but we've gotten to a place where they understand that. And we do have a really solid relationship.
That's good.
Yeah.
It's better than nothing, right?
Yeah. My parents are really cool people.
No, they sound awesome. Yeah. They sound really cool.
Like they're cool people. They just like, they believe in Jesus because Jesus got them sober. And like, I can't knock them for that.
Dude, this is another thing me and my wife talk about a lot is I would never speak ill of anybody's process of how they heal in their life and how they come to find that their beloved, right, or their God, or what they believe in, their spirituality. And I think the history of AA is really interesting. Like if you actually learn who started it and like that marriage and like how it all happened is really interesting. But the fact that getting sober is its own thing and Christianity, those two are two different things, right? And so when they come together, I love how you made that connection that like, especially the Calvary Chapel and especially the evangelical, like radicalism is an addiction. That's what radicalism is, right? And so it's really easy we see a lot of addicts get sober and then immediately give their testimony on the pulpit and then are like leaders or youth pastors or something because they're like zealots. They're just like, I will read this Bible every day and I will like, because it's like they have that addictive gene, and they've come from that, so it's like and then people in the church are like, yeah, this will be an easy employee. Thank you. You're going to work really hard.
Yeah. For cheap. Real cheap.
And
for free. That's just a lot of child labor.
But most real addicts know the fucking darkness and the pits of those places in life. So there's a lot of space. Space.
It's been very interesting to watch my parents hold that dichotomy simultaneously. Like it's interesting to see that. It was interesting to see them process that and like live their faith the way that they felt it was meant to be lived, but also be like, we're really close to my non-Christian family. My grandparents are Jewish. My cousins and aunts and uncles are Jewish. And like we get together like at least once a quarter with the whole family pretty much. And nobody has an argument about Jesus usually. So like I think they've just been doing it for a long time. And so they're disappointed that I didn't want to stay with it. But also there's like they were already practicing a life of living in harmony with family who didn't have the same beliefs with them. So I think that in that way, it's been a lot easier for me.
And you also come from a background of insane, immense shame from leadership roles, right? And so you have a lot of space, I imagine, in your healing to be like, yo, I have space. You don't have to be okay with me like perfectly. I still love you because let's just find some middle ground of love and we can move from that, That's like that's what we are building with our parents. And I feel like I have created a little middle ground. It's like tiny, but it's there. It's like, let's just build from that, and go from there.
For us, the biggest, like, I think, positive joining force has been the birth of my niece and nephew.
Yeah. What is it about those innocent, beautiful children that come out and family are like, we should just bond over this cute little thing?
I don't know. It's really cool. I've loved watching, like, I have 3 sisters. So I've loved watching them, like, my sister become a mom and my other sisters be aunties, and like seeing my parents be grandparents has been really, really rad. I don't know. It's just like, it's very, kids are great. Kids have this immense ability to heal and they don't even know it.
Yeah, it's because they're little gods. I think that, like, there's a lot of research that shows there's like this, like, when you're born, like babies and toddlers, they don't have any sort of grasp of anything really. So they're just receiving and receiving and receiving. Most children, unless there's unfortunate, like, genetic, like, faulty things that happen through birth or whatever, like, have nothing but light and love, right? Like, most children will be really upset if you kill an ant or destroy a bug, right? And so that doesn't start to develop until you're, like, a little bit older. And so there's just that, you cannot deny that innocence, and there's glory in that, like, little pocket. So that's beautiful. I had the same experience with my son. One of the things that brought me and my parents back together and to have any form of a relationship at all was that traumatic experience of being, like, rushed into fatherhood. And it was not an easy process reconnecting with my parents. And it's, in some ways it still isn't, but, like, he was this sort of, like, bridge that was like, you and I will not agree, but we have to figure this out because there's this beautiful little 2-year-old that needs our family to figure this shit out. And so, like, me and Zach, and he deserves it. Yeah. And the 4 of us fucking figured it out, and it was like, wow, this is what support feels like. It was like limited support, but it was still, like, a really beautiful thing. So we'll keep going here a little bit longer because I'm really curious. When you started to get into your, like, real healing journey, I heard you talk about a therapist. So do you have a current therapist now that you are actively talking to or seeing?
Yes. Yeah. I am a current therapist. I'm on medication. I'm fully I have fully bought into mental health care.
Good for you. And go for it.
No, go ahead. No, you go ahead.
I was just how often do you see your therapist? Is this like a therapist you've seen for a long time, or?
So this most recent one is actually new because my health insurance changed. But every other week. Yeah, I know, it's a bummer. But yeah, every other week. We have a nice talk.
You're on meds. We don't have to talk about the meds.
I mean, I don't have anything to hide.
I'm just, because me and Zach talk about, we've been on meds, we came off meds. Now we are big believers in plant medicine, and Zach uses plant medicine on a more, like,
religious basis.
More like a prescribed way. I do plant medicine in more of a retreat and send me through the cosmos so I can see myself as God type of way. We're big believers in psychedelic therapy, big believers in therapy, big believers in music therapy, art therapy. This is therapy for us.
All the therapy.
Exercise, like, so I'm just like eating, all of it. Like, there's so many things I do in my life now that are, like, part of my medicine bundle that help to keep me soft and help me feel, like, spiritual, right? And to reinvite spirituality into my life. And yeah, I'm just curious what you're doing and what are you doing now in your life that is, spiritually healing for you?
So there's a few things. I have, like, so obviously therapy. I was diagnosed with CPTSD, but also panic and anxiety disorder. So, which might be something that is genetic. It might be a result of trauma. But basically the chemicals in my brain don't balance out naturally on their own. So I'm on a mood stabilizer, which was amazing to get on. I remember after, like, a week of being on it, having something trigger me that would normally have sent me into a tailspin, and it didn't. And I was like, whoa, this is what normal people feel like. And then just like things that I do, I love gardening. That is like a really therapeutic practice for me. Like I have I don't know if you can see it, but I have like all my little seed starts over there.
Yeah.
In the corner.
Wow. You're in
Nate
good
loves
company
that
here.
shit.
I love gardening. So
I love gardening. I love growing food, particularly. There's something very satisfying about growing your own produce and harvesting it. I love like cooking. And I do pottery and weaving as like regular like therapeutic practices, I guess. But I think the like biggest thing for me that's really been the most healing has been running my own business.
What is that? What's the business?
I have like 3. So I have a short-term rental management company. I have a real estate company. And I have we just started, Matt and I just started an online technical course that we are working on to teach. Like our goal is to teach people how to utilize real estate to realize financial freedom. We both work for ourselves. We don't clock into an employer anymore. We don't sit at a cubicle. That's why I could do this last minute, because my time is my own. And I don't have to worry about getting time off work or working around a schedule, because I make the schedule.
Congratulations. That's amazing.
Thanks. And so that's mostly like, that is the gist of everything that I'm involved in, is around teaching people how to realize financial independence through real estate. Because that's what's helped us become financially independent and free. And in going through the process of building a business, you have to have a lot of confidence, and you have to be able to listen to your inner voice. And so that journey has been really therapeutic, because particularly in my industry, in the real estate industry, and particularly real estate investment, is very hetero cis white male dominant. And some of them are great, like my husband, hetero cis white male, amazing human, biggest sweetheart in the whole world. I mean, he looks terrifying if you look at him. Like he's like 6'3" and has like a big old beard, and he's like a lumberjack, but he is the kindest, sweetest man. He like believes so much in me and my dreams and is so supportive. But most of the rooms I walk into are like a lot of bros. And so being able to like negotiate, like a lot of my job is like negotiating and trusting my gut on negotiations and standing up for other people's financial best interest. And in doing that, I've realized a lot of healing, because it's like when someone treats you poorly in a way, particularly men, as a woman who grew up in the church, I used to like cower. And now I can punch back. And that's been really, really empowering. And then getting past the place where I could punch back, but to get to a place where not only I was able to, I guess, defend myself, but also just like lead the conversation to the point where there is no argument or fight. To have it go from the place where you, as a business owner, start to like, you learn how to like negotiate and wheel and deal, and you're having arguments and you're working out how to put deals together and make money, to where you get to a place that you are like a strategist and like projecting and forecasting the life that you want. That's been the most healing thing, is like we have this thing called Magic Mondays, where in the morning, every Monday, Matt and I just take 3 hours and we have no agenda. And we like use that time to like dream. That's like what Magic Mondays are for. So we just sort of like follow our bliss to whatever it inspires us to do. So sometimes Matt will like work on this video game that he's developing, or I will like make some pottery, and it will like generate this. It'll make me remember this person that I met the other week that I wanted to find on social media and connect with. And so the practice of being good and making my own income and believing in my ability to do that has probably been the most healing of anything. So sorry.
That's incredible.
Yeah, it sounds amazing.
Big
fan. We can barely hear the microphone punch.
If y'all ever want to learn about how to make money with real estate, that's like my jam.
Well, it's funny. We have me and Megan, my wife, and Evan's with us every other week, my son, and then we rent out a small little property to a really good friend of ours, and she is getting her real estate license. And so I'm going to hook her up with you. I want to be like, dude, I just had somebody on the podcast that could definitely help you get your foot in the door and like get this going.
Yeah, absolutely. I would love to.
That's really cool.
I love helping women get into this. That is like a big passion that I have. My podcast is like focused around teaching women and queer people how to get into real estate investment, because those aren't rooms where we have like the rooms where those topics are brought up are not rooms that we are feel very welcome in. And so I was like, well, if I'm not going to feel welcome in the room, I'm going to make the room. And so
that's cool, dude.
I feel
that's a mic drop right there, dude. Fuck yeah, that's cool.
I feel like the same people that like tower the real estate realm are also like the same types of people that tower the Calvary Chapel, if not evangelical Christianity realm as well.
You mean white cis males?
White cis males, white cis females too, but also like in the same context as like the female leaders in the church were under like a male leader.
Yeah, I think that's just world culture. I mean, it's like
capitalism.
That's just, I mean, I have recently connected over the last 2 years so much with my divine femininity, which this last retreat I went on, my divine femininity has really helped start, like, I realize is like what's helping really heal and my masculinity and coddle my masculinity. And I do believe God is a woman. And so I think that like everything, Mother Nature, Mother Ganja, grandmother, so much of my own healing has been like trusting that I can be soft with myself, as if like I like become my own mother and hold my really toxic masculine teenager in there and be like, it's okay, you can cry with me, right? And I think that like we are in the era of where the divine femininity is seeping through the cracks. It's always been there. It's been femininity that has ran the fucking planet. Who cleaned Jesus's body? It wasn't the men. No. It was the women.
No.
Right? Who's been in the kitchen? Who's been bearing the bodies? Who's been holding the sick children? Who's been like capable of like being with a painful situation and sitting in that painful situation? Women have. And so thank you for like being who you are, because I'm learning my place as a white cis male. I don't fully identify as like a straight man anymore, but I really do feel that femininity in me. And I think that femininity is in all of us. And I think that scares a lot of toxic masculinity. And so more women like you, and to fill these places and spaces, I don't want to do it. I'm done. I don't want to be any sort of like, this is it for us, is the podcast, you know, like, so that's amazing. Good for you. And also I really connected with you on gardening. I have found, especially when it comes to spirituality, right? There's something about being able to have a seed for like many years and this potential for life. And then with the right conditions, it not only produces like every little seed looks the same when it breaks that soil. And that alone is its own process of coddling and speaking niceness to it. And then all of a sudden, that little thing that looks all the same does change into its own form, and then produces this life that we can cut, throw into the kitchen, cook, and then eat and be like, I did this, but really the seed did everything. Like I just got to watch this.
Yeah, you just provided the conditions.
And it's like also what's magical is it's the shit. It's the compost. Like it's literally shit that feeds, that gives the energy. So it's like, there's just so much of how our own suffering
symbolism.
So much symbolism, right? Like the suffering and the pain that we've gone through as people in the church, and everybody goes through, is the blessing to get you to the next part of your life. So the shit matters, because without the shit, there wouldn't be life thereafter. And so I think there's a lot that you get from gardening. I'm a big believer in that, especially from us suffering from religious trauma, which you garden too. We just don't talk about what you garden too much on this podcast.
I love gardening. It's my favorite.
Do you garden fun things?
I garden the fun things, yes.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Hasn't been so successful recently, but they're tough things to garden.
Yeah, but that's what's worth it.
Yeah, totally.
Gardening has definitely been healing. and plant medicine I have also participated in. And
Good
that
for
was
you.
all. Yeah. I think we were texting on 420 is when I texted you.
Yep. And we both live in very cannabis friendly, happy places. And so cannabis is definitely being grown, and we are very supportive of the cannabis community. Mother ganja is sticky though. And so one of the things we talked about in our cast is like with religious trauma, and for our experience, not having much coddling motherly love at all through the church or anything like that. Cannabis really did become sort of the motherly love in my life and coddled a lot of my anxiety and panic. And so it's been a battle and a blessing at the same time of learning how to have balance with these things, right? And like all of that. And so, but wow, this has been fucking awesome.
Yeah, it's been amazing.
Anything on the top of your head right now that like from your story or from what we've been talking about, like anything that you would just be like, I want to add this.
I think I just want to add, because I know what comments are coming, right? Like I know who comments on your podcast and the sorts of things that are said. I've read them. I've responded to some of them. I just want to say this. If there's anybody who has literally walked the walk and talked the talk, I very literally spent my entire life and childhood dedicating my life to the Lord. I went to seminary. I was a missionary. I probably have done more legitimate evangelizing than most of the pastors at the pulpits that we sat beneath in church. I can read Hebrew and Greek. I studied at one of the top Bible colleges in the world. Moody Bible Institute is one of the oldest and most well-respected fundamentalist institutions in the world. And you have to qualify to get in there. Like, it's a free university, so they only let in people who are exceptionally Jesus-y. Yeah. So, like, anyone listening to this who's like, this is bullshit, like, I literally did all the right things. And at the end of the day, the thing that prevailed was that, like, my inner voice told me it was wrong. And I got out. And if you're like here denying that or thinking that, I had a bad childhood or I didn't have the right support or like any of us didn't have, like that we don't know what we're talking about. I just like when people come with that attitude, like, I just want to be like, I just want to say like, I did all the things. Like, I'm not sitting here as some fallen angel that fell from grace. I did literally everything that you're supposed to do. And I was still molested and I was still abused and I was still taken advantage of and I was still not taken seriously because this movement of Calvary Chapel is fucking toxic and it is a cult. And the men in charge of it, however well-intentioned or brainwashed they are themselves, are culpable and we need to hold them responsible. Like, if you have a kid at Calvary Chapel, Petaluma, go ask Zach Besney's what their safety protocols are for their junior high and high school students. If you are someone who like suffered abuse under that banner and like it wasn't your fault. And I would really love to see these orgs lose their not-for-profit status because they're not doing their mandated reporting that they're supposed to be doing to protect kids and innocent people who they are saying they're shepherding. And I would like it all to burn to the ground at the end.
Hell yeah. Love all of that.
You're speaking our language, baby.
Sorry.
No, that was a bomb that I was just kind of want to like just build. I was like, keep going.
We're just going to clip that. We're going to make a short of that one.
Go for it. Put it out there. I'm ready for them. Like,
yeah. And Zach, we say that too.
Zach knows. I've told him about this. I have received no apology.
Zach has a lot of people that I think, not just in your situation, but people that he's making enemies. But we're not here to call that out. It's something that I don't want to name drop. It's so hard not to name drop sometimes. But there's certain people that have told us, too close to family. There's certain family that like we're trying not to name drop. But there's people in our lives that have told us that we're making Christian enemies, and it's like that's not a really good look on the Christians.
Yeah, we have people
place.
so close to us that have said things to us where it's like, we would love to name drop certain things, but we're just in an odd situation of protecting not only, mostly it's like my son's 13 and he has a YouTube account and sees our shorts. And so it's like, and he like has connections to our parents and he considers himself a Christian. And so there's this like intertwining of just like family with us that are like where we do name drop. We name drop all the time, but we name drop with our guests, like what you're just saying, right?
Yeah.
Like we are right there behind you being like, and there's like, we've had recent Calvary Chapel people on that we didn't know the names they were dropping because they're from like Tennessee.
Yeah.
The head honchos, Calvary Chapel pastors at Tennessee with these mega churches. And we were just like, and we're going to have a guest on in June who's like, or July, who's like, dude, I'm going to drop every fucking name in Calvary Chapel you've ever. And we're just like,
sweet.
Let's do it. And so, but I really appreciate you doing that because we just stand behind you 100%.
100%.
And if you're in the comments, you heard it here, folks. Before we finish this beautiful podcast, this wonderful, full of gratitude, full of light, trauma healing, and toughness that we've gone through, Zachary.
Yes.
Go for it.
Yeah. To all the other people that might be deconstructing right now, do you have any advice? Maybe something simple, maybe something complicated. It doesn't really matter. But any advice you could give them to help them deconstruct, because it is a complicated and tough process.
If your inner voice is telling you something, listen to her. She speaks truth.
Oh, that was perfect.
That was perfect. Put that in the book.
That's perfect. Well, thank you so much, Sorcha, for doing this, for being so vulnerable.
For having me. This was wonderful. This was great for me too. Thank you.
No, I love that.
Absolutely. Thank you. I'm so happy it was. But your story specifically, all of our stories are really, they're so hard to kind of share, right? To get to this point. And so you being on our podcast and joining us for this, me and Zach are perceived as hetero, white, cis males, right? This is how we are perceived in our podcast. And so thank you for trusting our space to share such serious sexual trauma of your childhood. You make me feel safer in my experiences being, a boy at these times, going through experiences and being told certain things. I really respect you. And I am so happy for where you are in life, your businesses, your gardening, you and your husband's wonderful marriage, that the fact that you guys deconstructed together is a rarity and a blessing.
Yeah, we got real lucky there.
Yeah. And so thanks again. And can't wait to get this podcast out in a few weeks.
Yeah.
But
thanks for having me.
It's been wonderful seeing your face again.
Yeah, likewise.
Yeah. Anyways, thank you, everybody. Thanks for joining the Moral Comment Podcast. This has been episode 74, which is a very powerful number in the universe that comes up in my life every time. It's like 74 is everywhere. And so I feel like it's a really significant podcast episode for you to be on. It makes a lot of sense. And so love you. Love everybody. Love you, Zach.
Yeah, love you, man.
And until next time, bye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.